Welcome back. In a recent survey, almost 70% of college administrators identified mental health as their top concern when it comes to students. According to a 2016 report from the Center of Collegiate Mental Health, enrollment at colleges and universities around the U.S. is up 5.6%, but the number of students seeking mental health services is up by nearly 30% over the year before. The problem is, in many cases, schools aren't keeping up with the demand. In fact, one Florida school, the Florida Coastal School of Law in Jacksonville, is doing away with mental health services just in time for final exams, citing a lack of resources. And joining us for more on tonight's topic is Keith FITZGERALD, a political science professor at New College of Florida, Jamie Smith, the director of communications and marketing at State College of Florida, and Dr. Angela STERANKO, a clinical psychologist specializing in children and adolescents. She is the founder of Fundamental Psychology in Venice. Thank you all for joining us today. And Keith, we usually have you on arguing politics, but your day job is a college professor, and you deal with this every day.
Yeah, and it's nice to talk about my day job for a change, where I can represent the institution. It's an ordinary feature of life that you have to learn how to deal with stress. New college is a very demanding academic environment, and so there's nothing surprising about people dealing with stress. But I do think that there have been changes in the way that society deals with kids and young people these days that make the stressors even greater. And so, as in my job as an academic counselor, I'm not a psychologist, but it's very frequently the case that academic problems become necessarily bleed over into counseling issues, and so we have to deal with it all the time.
And I imagine sometimes it's obvious to you, and sometimes you don't even see it coming.
Right, and one of the things you have to deal with is sometimes people disappear, so they deal with stress by simply avoiding human contact and hiding out, and you may not even realize there is a problem until it's actually gotten into an academic situation that's very difficult to fix.
So Jamie, how do you deal with that as a college and university? I mean, you have limited resources, and as Keith said, there are students who are having, different kinds of stress now than they ever had before.
Well, at State College of Florida, we have what we call a care team that helps to promote the wellness of students. We, in addition to having a team with limited resources, we promote the resources that are available to students throughout the college, and a lot, to make sure they're aware that there are resources available to them. They can either talk, which again, there's that concern about being able to be confidential, so they can raise awareness with the resources we have available, or they can call or email the resources confidentially. And they can see people on campus or off campus.
How do you deal with, as we reported, that the number of enrolled students is going up, but the number of those seeking counseling is going up even quicker?
Well, right now we've been able to handle those students at our institution through our care team. If and when we see the resources dwindling, we'll address those and increase our resources, or make sure that if we don't have those resources, we somehow make them available to students.
Right. And Angela, you're in a unique situation because you have dealt with students as affiliated with, I believe, State College, but you have also done this in your private practice. So you are seeing these students before, during, and after they were on the college campus. How has this changed over the last years?
So I think it's interesting where in my private practice I can kind of pick up where a lot of on-campus resources leave off. If there's limited resources or a limited level of training, that I'm able to really do more intensive or more long-term therapy with students who need that extra help and that more intensive work outside of classes.
And this is not a new phenomenon. I remember, I dare say, a while back when I went off to college, some of my high school friends, they had difficulties adjusting to being away from home. That's a big part of it. But do you see this more often now than years ago?
I don't know if it's that it's happening more often, but I think there's maybe, or I hope that there's a little bit more awareness about it, that transition from living with our parents and having them oversee our day-to-day or be involved in our life, and then going to really independently having to manage your schedules, having to organize yourself and kind of get things planned out for yourself, that can sometimes be a lot and be pretty overwhelming.
And Keith, you mentioned that to me yesterday, that when you're in high school, it's a very structured environment, and then when you go off to college, you're on your own and you need to be more responsible.
Right, and actually I think that the culture of people seeking out help when they realize they need it is a step in the right direction, not in the wrong direction. But we do have highly structured environments and highly pressurized environments for kids in high school where they have huge number of assignments, lots of rubrics, lots of hoops to jump through, outside activities. They go off to college and the professor says, hey, you know, we have 2 exams and you have an assignment at the end, and they say, well, okay, what do I do? And you say, well, you've got to figure out what to do. And that is such a leap, it causes a lot of anxiety.
Jimmy, we only have about 30 seconds left, but does, for instance, State College have a system to guide students through that process before it gets to the point that they're having real serious problems?
Like you mentioned, we look for signs to signal that a student is struggling and try to pull them in and help them before it gets too far where they won't succeed.
Okay, we are just getting started with this conversation. We'll pick it up right after we check our forecast. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the availability of mental health counseling and treatment for college students in Florida. Our guests tonight are Keith FITZGERALD of New College, Jamie Smith of State College of Florida, and Dr. Angela STERANKO, a clinical psychologist at Fundamental Psychology. Let me read you all something that was in USA Today and get you to comment on it. Today's college students are more diverse than ever, more students from low-income backgrounds, more students who identify as minorities or are LGBT, and this means that students are entering college with more diverse needs. Do you see this, and does this result in the fact that you're treating a more diverse population and more diverse problems?
Well, as you can imagine, I mean, we have a lot of students on our campus, and if you people watch, so to speak, we're an open access institution, so we get a diverse range of students, and it's very interesting to see the type of students that come on campus. And you're right, their needs are varied. Anything from anxiety to stress to a different variety of needs they might have are presented on campus. So you have to be willing to address the diverse needs. But there is a lot of interesting characteristics that come with students who are creative, who are scientific, who are focusing on math. You just see the wide variety of those students.
Keith, how prepared are faculty to deal with this? Because you're not trained psychologists or therapists, but you are in many respects first responders.
Well, New College is a very exceptional place because we're very small, and students have more one-on-one contact with faculty members than just about any institution I can think of. So we're in a better position, in a sense, to sort of see where academic problems relate to other issues. On the other hand, we're not trained professionals. We can't refer. We don't diagnose. We just have to be attentive to when somebody is becoming self-defeating in ways that suggest that maybe they need to talk to a professional.
Is it your responsibility to refer them or to help get a professional?
No, our responsibility is to deal with their academic issues, but increasingly you should be mindful that in some cases that means this is somebody who can get some help. And so I always encourage any student to go to the counseling center and get some help. And I disagree with the setup guy who talked about drug culture. I think part of teaching people to be resilient is to learn how to avail themselves of the resources that are available to them to address the issues they have.
So, Angela, what do you do in situations like that? I mean, there may be students out there who are trading prescriptions, you know. I mean, college kids do things that may not be advisable.
Right. I think a lot of times students are kind of grasping at straws when they feel overwhelmed. They're not sure. They either aren't aware of the resources available, or there are some barriers kind of preventing them from accessing them. Either some stigmas about mental health and counseling, or some kind of resistance to accepting that they've maybe failed or not done as well in a certain setting as they hoped they would. So oftentimes they don't come to see me until after things have already progressed to the point where grades are impacted. The family has become aware. You know, people are having to step in. So I think ideally it would be great to have a little bit more of that awareness and reaching out to students who are deemed at risk potentially.
And see, at State College of Florida, that's exactly why we established what we call the CARE team. It's to consult, assess resources, and educate. But part of what we do is we actually do refer. We train our educators to say, Are they showing signs and symptoms of somebody who might be in need? And we might refer them to a resource, whether it be internal or external, again, depending on the student. And we've created a program that's called Safe Harbor, which basically any student that's in need, it provides for their well-being, whether it be mental health, Title IX, or any other issue. We're trying to capture those issues before it gets too far where they can't be successful in the academic world.
Right, and I'm wondering, what about in terms of resources, in terms of the state? You know, one of the things, and we talk about this on this broadcast a lot, that Florida is 49th in the entire nation in terms of spending on mental health issues. Does that, you know, become more problematic in terms of the funding at the university level, in terms of the resources that are coming from the state?
Well, so remember, the governor has on his desk a bill that actually increases funding for higher education. So those of us who are working in that are happy about that.
But as Adam pointed out, mental health funding is
right.
not included.
There was a piece in there at the request of the Board of Governors to add some money for this. It didn't get through. I think the awareness is there now, and it might in the future. One thing I think you also have to remember, the social scientist in me, is that we focus on college students as having these kinds of issues, partly because we have institutions in place to deal with them. In the population at large, other people are going undiagnosed and unnoticed.
Right, and then and not the schools that you're all associated with, but I remember back in my days in working in Boston, I did a major investigative report after a terrible incident at Harvard, which does not want for anything in terms of resources, but there was an attitudinal situation there where they weren't providing adequate mental health resources because they figured that if you're at Harvard, you're there for a reason. Have the attitudes, Angela, you've seen in terms of local colleges and universities changed over the years, that something that may not have been taken seriously before is now?
Well, I think unfortunately, because we've had a lot of instances that have come to light and we've had a lot of safety concerns or different difficulties come up at schools, I hope that schools are more aware that it is something that's vital. Obviously, I'm a big advocate of mental health, so I'd hope that it's something that's kind of brought to light a little bit more, the stigma gets reduced, and we're able to have the resources available to the students at the lower level. You know, early on, the teachers are kind of the first line of defense, you know, different administrators and things along those lines, hopefully being able to identify.
And I would imagine the student population is key. If they see somebody who is either hurting or struggling, for kids to speak up.
Yeah, we have a program, See Something, Say Something, and we actually plaster these pamphlets all over the campuses, three of our campuses, so that students know that it's okay if you see something, say something, and that's related to all regards of whether, again, it's sexual assault, domestic violence, mental health concerns. We want our students to say something and seek help, and to create a peer mentoring system to let their peers know that it's okay to seek help. You know, and speak to the regard that don't stereotype it, don't create a stigma. Be okay with speaking out and speaking up, because you can get the help you need.
And we only have a few seconds left, but Angela, do you see kids more willing to ask for help these days?
At least in my practice, yes. You know, I see that kids are reaching out, they're acknowledging it to their parents, they're talking about what therapists they meet with and what therapists their friends meet with. It's a little bit less of a stigmatizing topic, and I think that's a great direction to be able to go, because even people who are functioning really well can always work with improving things.
All right, let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, funding for opioid addiction treatment. Welcome back. Should we be doing more to attend to the mental health needs of our college students? Would more funding from the state make a difference? Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. And Keith, from your perspective, the answer is?
I think we want students to be self-reliant and responsible, but part of the way you do that is teaching them to avail themselves of the resources they have at their disposal to address whatever kinds of problems they might have.
Jamie, do you feel that State College has enough resources coming from the state to handle the number of students who need this help?
Well, I mean, honestly, you can always use more resources when you're dealing with something as complicated and difficult as mental health or mental illness. But what I would encourage the students and folks to do is reach out to the resources that are available, whether it's at our institution or through local psychologists or other institutions. But find the resources available. Don't be don't get caught up in the stigma and stereotypes. Seek out resources, get the help you need, and if possible, encourage your legislators to give more support.
Angela, the one question I didn't ask is what are parents to do? In some cases, the parents are nearby. In other cases, they're in another state and or may not be fully aware of what's going on with their kids.
So I think it's tough because it does kind of limit your options of how do you provide support for your child who's maybe in another state. I think it's more about reaching out to whatever resources are available. I think starting with the college's first line of defense, but then also trying to do research, trying to make sure that whatever counselor or psychologist or psychiatrist you're seeking out is a good fit, specializes in the area that you need help with. Because regardless of privilege, upbringing, home life.
Well, let me ask one last question, because in some of my reading on this, the issue at some schools have been that there is a fee for service for mental health services, whether it's on or off campus, and what do you do in that case?
Well, in many instances, the providers we work with, or if we're able to, there's a sliding fee scale which makes it affordable based on the student or the parent's income, overall income. So they can do a sliding fee scale, or that fee may be waived if there are resources available. But in any all times, we try to provide those services because it shouldn't be limited to only those who can afford it.
Okay, we have to leave it there. But before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, funding for opioid treatment. Opioid overdose is now the leading cause of accidental death in the United States for people between the ages of 25 and 64, higher than car crashes. Florida is getting $27 million in federal funds to combat the epidemic. It comes after Governor Scott declared a state of emergency. However, the GOP health bill eliminates the addiction treatment mandate for states choosing to expand Medicaid. Meanwhile, millions of people could lose access to care that could save their lives. And here is what some of you are saying. Melissa Catherine writes, they choose to do it. They should pay for treatment if they decided to get help and really want to get clean. It's not everyone else's responsibility to pay for their poor choices. Brittany Carroll writes, if someone's suffering from withdrawal with no help, they will get so sick of feeling horrible that they will do anything for a high, stealing, robbery, etc. Letting addicts do this on their own will never work. And Kevin Kumango writes, more than 50,000 people died from opioid overdose in 2016. That's like all the casualties from the Vietnam War happening every year. Is this the time to be cutting funding? What do you think about the mental health care available to college students? Did you get counseling or treatment in school? Join the conversation by visiting our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, you can watch past Roundtable discussions. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to our guests for being here tonight. Keith Fitzgerald is a professor of political science at New College of Florida. Jamie Smith is director of communications and marketing at State College of Florida. And Dr. Angela STERANKO is a clinical psychologist specializing in children and adolescents. She is the founder of Fundamental Psychology in Venice.